A VC fund it's an aggregation of risk capital from various sources. Now, generally, VC funds are not very small. I mean, we call them small if they're less than 100 mil or even 100 mil. But from an entrepreneur perspective, startup perspective, 100 mil is a decent amount for a fund. Now, this fund comes from a variety of institutional and individual sources. So HNIs do invest in a fund so that the money goes in the various startups and they make superior returns versus the public market returns or the FDs or the LICs or these kind of mutual funds. It's a risk capital. Then the money is invested by various institutional entities. Now it could be SIDBI fund of funds, which means SIDBI allocates certain part to be invested into the funds. So there are many funds in India. If you Google it, you will get SIDBI fund. The funds has invested in so many private equity funds. Third is there are most of the funds in India are national funds. Like 90% of the capital is US, Singapore, Switzerland, Abu Dhabi, etc. Now various endowment funds are there, various insurance pension funds are there, and MIT, etc. MLI network is there. GIC is the Singapore sovereign fund is there, which does invest in private equity funds. Similarly, ADIA, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, is there. So world over, there are sovereign funds, which means those funds are being run by the government. Now they invest in a lot of private equity funds because they cannot invest very small amounts indirectly their startups, and beyond a point they cannot identify startups to invest in them. For example, ADIA, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, typically does not take a bet of less than $100 million. I mean, they're taking smaller bets, but then they will tag along the existing investors. But standalone, it doesn't make sense for them to invest less than $100 million singularly. So they would typically invest in a fund like, I'm just taking an example, a theoretical example, it could be Sequoia or a Bertelsmann, etc., etc. Similarly, there are companies like Apple, there are companies like Naspers in South Africa. They're sitting with hundreds of billions or tens of billions of extra cash because they're a very profitable company. And investors so one is profitable companies, so there are a lot of internal accruals. Their money would be sitting here and there, so they'll allocate a small part to a VC fund. Now, those funds are designed by people like you and me professionally, I mean, with some kind of pedigree, and these people would run the fund and invest in the startups. So this is how the capital of the fund comes from most international sources. It could be corporates, HNIs, governments, education institutes, pension fund, etc., etc. That's the source of capital. On an average, the fund life is 10 to 12 years. This is an average. There are funds which have shorter life. There are funds which have longer life. Which means they'll keep investing in various startups, and then after certain years, it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years, sometimes after 10 years, they keep harvesting that money back. So they invest $100 in a startup, they would like to reap out 500 or 700 or maybe $1,000 after a few years. So this is how they make money. They invest 100, they get 500 out or 1,000 out. But the thing is, either some startups give them insane amount of returns, or they don't give at all. So there would be a large number of portfolio companies which are written off. In the VC funds, it's very usual to see the companies to the extent of 25% investment being written off or de facto written off, which means they would not be focusing on them at all. The second part is they invest in various startups and they make superior returns. When I'm saying superior, it's not 100% year on year, but if the public market these days is giving you 9 to 10% average return over a longish period of time, they'll probably give you 18 to 20% return over a longish period of time. Now, it may sound just 10 to 20%, but 20% over a period of 30 years is extremely rewarding. It's like you can exponentiate it, you can geometrically exponentiate it, and you will see 20% for 20 years versus 10% for 20 years. So this is how they make money, and then they participate. The fund manages themselves along with the investors. There is a minimum threshold of returns which they return to the investors inside the fund. Beyond that, the fund managers, the team do participate in their profits, and that's a significant participation. If the fund does well, the fund managers do well, as well as the investors do well.